Welcome back to Big Balls Fantasy Football, our free agency frenzy show. We are back on the podcast and the video cast for everyone. We already went over all of our Bears transitions so far this offseason, and now we want to get into what other teams have been doing and how it will affect your fantasy drafts, even though it seems like a long ways off, how it will affect them next year.
Yeah, I mean, let's just go balls right into it, man. There are a lot of teams been picking up a lot of great players. Strangely enough, this year more than other years, I think it's because a lot of teams just needed players. There was a lot of action. Usually there isn't as much action before the draft, but there were a lot of notables. I will start with, basically we're going to do my beasts, her real men. We're each going to go back and forth with 5 different players that we think are going to really affect your fantasy draft for good or for bad. So let's start with the potential good. Eric Decker, Super Bowl team, Denver. He was always kind of like the third and fourth banana on a team that had
a million.
Yes, exactly. So he deserved his payday. He signed a 5-year deal with the Jets, $36.25 million. Way to go, Eric. Unfortunately, you're on the Jets, who we all know what we think of the Jets. I mean, you have Geno Smith there, but now, potentially, they're in talks with Michael Vick to go over there. I have a feeling that the Jets just like to run a circus over there.
They pretty much do every year.
Yeah.
It's the quarterback carousel controversy.
Yeah, Mark Sanchez is going to be, sitting on the bench earning boatloads of cash, sleeping with every woman in New York. Good for you, Mark. Way to go, but you suck at football. Decker got over 1,200 yards last season, 11 touchdowns, but that was with Manning. With either Geno Smith or with Vic, who's kind of he's literally on his last legs right now. I think you're going to get a lot of fantasy potential out of him because he's good and he's fast, and there aren't a lot of there's always some potential, receivers there, but LaFell went to another team. So, you have an area there where, but don't expect those numbers that he got on Denver.
No, I don't think so either. And, they brought him in and paid him to be a number one. Mm-hmm. And obviously, on the Broncos last year, he was not a number one. He wasn't even number 2. He was like number 3 most of the time.
Yeah.
Maybe somewhere in there. And you have to remember, he didn't show up at all. He had basically no catches for the first half of last season. It wasn't until Welker got a little gimpy, teams started figuring out how to defend the Broncos a little better, that he blew up in the last half of the season. So I just don't think they paid him to be a number 1. Quarterback is iffy.
Yeah, well, you took the words right out of my mouth. I was going to say there's 2 words that stand for why Decker didn't come in blazing, was Welker. And as I predicted last year at the beginning, Welker went insane. And he got hurt, and then he came back and went insane again. So, Decker, I would say he's going to probably go in the middle of the drafts because, he's a name. He's off of a Super Bowl team. And even though he is on a crappy team, as we always say, it doesn't matter, how well the team is doing. It matters how well the player is doing.
Exactly. So, and I think a lot of people, though, are actually going to take him too early, expecting a lot from him, and they're not going to get that. So beware of that one.
Definitely.
So I'm going to go into my first one. This is another very iffy one, interesting one, but running back Ben Tate, he went from the Texans to the Browns. Now, he was basically the best running back out there on most boards in free agency this year. But there weren't many running backs out there to get. Yeah. So a plus side for him is that he did start 7 games in 2013 in place of injured Arian Foster. So that obviously made his stock go up because he had more starts. But what did not help him is he only averaged 4 yards per carry and 3 touchdowns in those 7 starts. So not so great with stats. But he played through 3 broken ribs through, I think, about 4 games.
Yeah.
So there again, you're like, well, this guy's tough. I mean, we can definitely have him out on the field. But the Browns needed to do something. They were a complete mess last year at running back. They had Trent Richardson, of course, traded him to the Colts. Then they had old man Willis McGahee. Sorry, McGahee, but it's true.
Nope.
And they had Obaniah. They had Fozzie Whitaker. I mean, they were just rotating backs as much as they possibly could to try to get a few yards here and there. They ended up being 27th in rushing. So obviously this is an area that the Browns felt like they needed to get somebody in that can be a consistent starter. And they didn't overpay him. They only gave him $7 million for 2 years. So that's not too bad. Again, running backs are not getting that crazy big money anymore. It's just not the position that's getting paid as much. So what I think you have to look out for Ben Tate is the plus side of him is it's looking like he's definitely going to be the starter. I don't see anybody else that he has competition with to be the starter. And what do we say about running backs? It's much better to get a running back in fantasy that you know is going to be out there for 80% of the carries than a back that's splitting carries 50-50. So that's a plus. However, the minus with him is he is injury prone. Again, that's why he didn't get paid more.
A little bit. Jesus.
I just don't. It's been, ankle, knee, ribs, back maybe, or hamstring. There's been so many injuries with him in his career that even though he's going to be the starter, he will probably not be out there for all 16 games. So he's, again, a guy that I would not take him in. I wouldn't even take him in my first 3 to 4 rounds. I would take him late. And he's a chancy one. So if you do take him or you decide to take him early if you're in a deep league, you better have someone else that's gonna be a steady backup.
He's definitely a second or third string running back, and you tuck him away, and you're gonna be sitting around in like the 14th round and go, yeah, sure, Ben Tate.
Yeah. Pick him up for maybe a flex, throw in your flex position if you need him.
Yeah, but the change in team is good for him because that team turned into a really big mess all around, not just at the running back position, a complete mess. I mean, Matt Schaub's out there running around in free agency land, and that team just decimated itself. I don't know what happened; it imploded. So it's good. He gets to have a fresh start. Maybe fantasy-wise, he will. A lot of players, all of a sudden, they go to other teams. And they just flourish because they're in a different system, a different program, and he might take off.
I mean, I think he's high risk, high reward.
Type
of player.
Definitely.
And the other thing about the Browns, is that we don't know their quarterback situation either. They're all over the board with quarterback. Might be drafting, might still be looking for somebody out there in free agency. Probably going to look toward the draft. And if they get a young quarterback, they need a running back in there that they can hand the ball off to and try to get some points to help out that young quarterback. So that might be a plus for his stock as well.
Definitely. My next one is Emmanuel Sanders, who did really well on the Steelers last season. He got 740 receiving yards, 6 touchdowns. I mean, you can't complain about that. I mean, it was a rough offense, not a lot of problems at the running back position, so they had to pass a lot, and it got, big, but he had Big Ben. So he was used to, getting some regular catches there, some regular consistency. Now he is going over to Denver. It's like they lose Decker. They lose Decker, but they put Sanders in his place, and I actually think Sanders is going to work out better. He has a lot of speed, and I think he's more touchdown prone. Unfortunately, it's an up and it's a down because as we talked about, and as you said, there's 1 million wide receivers on Denver, but it's Peyton Manning, and he did feed it around last season. Decker was still phenomenal in the second half of the season as far as fantasy is concerned. A few, like me, held on to him, and he balled for you in the second half of the season. But so Sanders, same thing. The chemistry hopefully will come in the preseason, but he's going to be another weapon for Manning. I think he's going to do really well. I think the touchdowns are going to go up. I think his yardage is going to go up. I mean, I think you might get I think he might have a 1,000-yard season on there. I'm going to make my bold statement and say Manuel Sanders, 1,000 yards, and I would take him pretty early in my draft.
Really? Okay. Early? Well, it's just
not first, of course, but I'm talking about if you're in a like a 12, 16 team league. I mean, take him because once the wide receivers start going, they're going to go fast and furious. And unfortunately, wide receivers are becoming as dime a dozen as running backs are.
Yeah, absolutely. And, that's again, the scary part about Denver is that they just have so many people. Mm-hmm. So it's like, how much will he get the ball? But how many players on their team had over 1,000 yards receiving last year? So if they have 4 or 5 receivers with over 1,000 yards, then whoever you take, you're doing all right.
It's not a Patriots situation where they have all of those targets for Brady and you don't get as much potential across the board. I don't know if Peyton Manning's going to have another season like last season. None of us know because that was, it was for the record books. But hey, if he does, I mean, Sanders is another great weapon.
Yeah, it should be interesting. He definitely is fast, so I'm excited to see the chemistry, I think, develop between him and Manning.
Yeah.
So my second one is wide receiver Andre Roberts. He went from the Arizona Cardinals to the Washington Redskins. Now, he was an interesting guy as well. He fell off quite a bit last year because he became Arizona's number three wide receiver.
Yeah.
Malcolm Floyd really stepped into that number 2 position.
And we predicted that Andre Roberts was going to be the guy. He was a slot guy, but
yeah, Floyd stepped in there and did it. And sometimes you can't predict everything. But now he's going to the Redskins, and they got him cheap. They got him for 4 years, $16 million. So that's not bad. And he's young. He's only 26 years old. So that is very, very good for the Redskins. They got a young wide receiver. Now, over there in Redskin land, he is going to be the number 2 receiver behind Pierre Garçon. We definitely know that RG3 needed another target. He probably still needs more targets, or he would like them at least, but this is one addition for him. And they have their new head coach, which is Jay Gruden, and he was with the Bengals, as we know, last year. And the Bengals were 8th in passing last season with him as their offensive coordinator. So I think that he's definitely going to try to keep the balance of run and pass in that offense, but I do think he wants it to be explosive. And there's always the let's not try to injure RG3 again. Let's not make him run around as much. Let's get some receivers that can get open and grab some balls. So I still think Pierre Garçon is going to be the guy for sure, fantasy-wise, on that team. But I think you could take Andre Roberts late. I think you could stick him in a flex position. And he is going to be the number 2. He is the number 2 guy. That's what they're paying him to be. So, again, he's high risk,
mid-reward.
Yeah,
and I just want to add to that. The reason we picked him last year was because he was second on a potentially explosive offense with, Carson Palmer down there, all brand new, shiny new. And it just didn't kind of work out that way for Arizona. So this is going to be like Andre Roberts' last stand, I think. If he can't prove himself on the Redskins, he's just going to fall by the wayside.
I think he's going to go late round, or if you're not in a very deep league, he'll probably just be hanging out there on the waiver wire. So, maybe you'll pick him up and get lucky if that offense gets going. But,
for
sure.
Pick,
and we haven't done, the draft hasn't happened, so we have no idea who teams are taking in the draft.
Right. My next beast is Hakeem Nicks, who just signed a 1-year deal with Indy for almost $4 million. He gets to have some new blood, and again, this is another injury-prone player. I've picked him up many years, and by week 4 or 5, been cursing Hakeem Nicks' name.
The foot, the knee.
The head, something, always something. But he has new blood. He's on Indy. He's in a place that needs receivers. Reggie Wayne is no longer. Marvin Harrison's been gone for a while. So Luck needs targets. I think,
Well, I think Wayne is going to be back. He's going to be back.
But he's still older.
But he did go through the injury, yeah.
He's older, and he went through an injury, which means he's not going to be the Reggie Wayne that he was. So, sorry to say gone, Reggie, but, I mean...
That's Greg predicting that. I don't know. I might still be picking up Reggie Wayne. He's been a beast for so long, so that's okay, though.
Players off of major injuries are always iffy to me. But I don't know why I've taken Nicks so many times. So anyway, 896 receiving yards last year, still in like the crappy, Giants offense. So, we'll see.
We will see. I mean, he's got talent. He's got a lot of talent. It's just like, Jesus, can you stay on the field?
Exactly.
And he's got a good quarterback. I mean, you got Luck throwing to you.
That's why I went with him. I mean, our picks right now are what's so far in free agency, which has been more activity than usual, but still a small amount.
And interesting, I mean, these picks are the ones that we're talking about because they're interesting. They could potentially, win your fantasy team for you next year, or they could potentially do nothing and you draft them.
And they're team changers. A lot of them are changing the rhythm of how these coaches and how these GMs are saying, this is the direction we're going.
Yeah, for sure. So my next guy, and I have a little more hope for this guy than some of these changes we've been seeing in free agency, is wide receiver Golden Tate. He went from the Seahawks to the Lions. The Lions are definitely expecting him to live up to his contract. He got a 5-year, $31 million contract with $13.25 million guaranteed. Again, he's a young guy. He's only 25 years old, so that is a plus for the Lions. Of course, we know that he's going to be the number 2 wide receiver there.
Who's
up
the
there
number 1
in
there in Detroit?
What's his name?
Yeah, what's his name? Named after some Transformer. Oh, that's right.
That guy, Megatron. Yes. So, as we know, Megatron draws double, triple coverage. He always has the best corner shadowing him from every team. So that is a big, big, big plus for Golden Tate. The Lions were 3rd in passing and 6th in total offense last season. I don't see that changing too much. Also, Tate had his best season last year. He had 64 receptions for 898 yards and 5 touchdowns. And another plus that I think Detroit is seeing in him is that he not only has playoff experience now, but he has Super Bowl experience now. He has a Super Bowl ring.
Yep.
So I know teams like to get those players that have been there, done that. And they obviously have their new head coach, Jim Caldwell, and he's an offensive guy. He was basically hired to work with Stafford and keep that offense going like crazy, make Stafford better, and they're bringing in Tate to try to get some chemistry there with another number 2 wide receiver. I like him. Now, I think he is a guy you should take earlier because, again, I think this offense is still going to be explosive. They're going to be throwing the ball like crazy still, so I don't think you have to worry about that at all. And because Megatron will obviously get you fantasy points because he's insane, but it's just going to open up Golden Tate so much more. So I would take him pretty early in my draft. I think he's going to produce. He's got well over 1,000 yards in him. I mean, I would say he's got, closer to 1,300. Possibly. He almost hit 1,000 last year, 1,400 yards, double-digit touchdowns.
Yes.
I think he can get 10 touchdowns. Now, it might sound a little high, but, this is my bold prediction for now. And if you get him, you're going to be happy you had him if he hits those numbers.
I couldn't agree with you more, actually, and I hope he's already gone out for a steak dinner with Megatron, and they've broken bread, and you're going to run that way, I'm going to run that way, it's going to be great.
It's going to be fun to watch. Just don't do good against the Bears.
Rashad Jennings just signed a 4-year, $14 million deal with the Giants, and I actually see a lot of potential in this, and the reason being, first of all, he had 733 rushing yards, 292 receiving yards, and 6 touchdowns for the Raiders last season. He was good for your fantasy, not in the touchdown area, but in the yardage area. He was damn consistent. I played him every week in the flex position, and he worked out for you. But David Wilson, We all know that name all too well, and we know it because he was notorious for fumbling in the first game of the season a few seasons ago and the last game of the season, and further on, and then getting benched because of his fumbleitis. Then he got a severe injury and has been gone even more. So I just think the Giants are sick and tired of dealing with Wilson. And, I mean, they're saying, yes, he's going to come back from the injury and he's going to be the starter. I'm not buying that too hard.
Yeah, I had high hopes for him, but obviously he's not shaken out on the pro level. And they've brought in Jennings to definitely be competition for him at the very least.
Yeah.
Might be hoping he's the starter. So
yeah, it's going to be an interesting training camp, I think, with the two of them. And I think, honestly, Jennings is going to come out ahead because I just don't think Coughlin trusts him at the ball anymore. I mean, once you get fumbleitis that bad, it just, you have a reputation in the league.
Yeah, and then if Jennings does start, it might be a situation where, you know, he gets 70% of the carries.
Yeah, I think if he gets on a hot streak, or I think if Wilson ends up being the starter for some reason, something's going to happen. Jennings is going to be your guy. I would take him in the top third of your draft. I mean, everybody's going to jump on Wilson, but then if you jump on Jennings a few rounds later, I think you're going to get a lot more reward out of him.
Yeah, and of course, I think that we're hoping, obviously, that the Giants find their offense, find their team, but find their quarterback, Eli Manning. Are you out there? Yeah. And hopefully that their offense looks a million times better than it did last year. So if that's the case, then, you know, your running back in that situation will be successful.
Yep.
So let me move it on. My next guy is running back Darren McFadden, and he did not go anywhere. He stayed in Oakland. Yay! But I had to talk about him anyways. Now, his situation is kind of interesting, I guess. You know, he knew that even though he was hitting the free agent market, there weren't a lot of people calling him. There wasn't a ton of money being offered his direction. So when Oakland threw out a contract, he basically was like, well, screw it, you know, I'll stay in Oakland and make some money.
Yeah.
Now, his contract is only for 1 year, and it's $1.75 million guaranteed. That is like no money. He's got $2.25 million in incentives. So obviously there's some stuff in that contract that they are hoping he can get back to being the McFadden that they have always wanted him to be. Obviously his stock is not good because he's injury prone. He cannot stay healthy. So this is the year that he needs to prove himself, and he needs to prove that he can stay healthy to get a better deal next year. So that's why I think he went ahead and was like, all right, screw it. I'll sign the 1 year deal and hopefully have a breakout amazing season, stay healthy, and make my money next year. We will see. He's only had one 1,000-yard season. That was in 2010, and that's also the season that he played the most games so far in his pro career. So get back on that, McFadden. And but Oakland does need him again, hopefully to stay healthy, because Jennings, which we just talked about, went to the Giants. And their quarterback situation is another situation that's up in the air. So maybe they draft a quarterback. Maybe Vic goes there, or they get somebody else, or Pryor stays. But they need a running back they can trust to hand off the ball. Their division is not easy for sure. So McFadden, this is the year, buddy. Again, another guy with so much talent, and he just can't stay on the field. So if you can stay on the field, then we as fantasy owners would love that. Take him late in your draft. If you're not in a deep league, he might still, again, be out there on the waiver wire. But he is a guy that if he can be out there, he can do damage. So, you know, he's a good guy to stash on your bench. If you got room for him, see how he starts out the season, see how his first 4 or 5 weeks are. If you need him in the flex for a bye week, maybe you get lucky. He fits in there. You know, but if he has a season like 2010, is possible, then you'll be happy that you grabbed him. And that's why I said chill him out on your bench, wait for the first few weeks of the season and see if he's doing anything and if he's not limping around.
Yeah, I mean, just maybe pray that you have some insane Raider fan in your draft. It happens all the time, and they'll be like, "Yeah, man, I'm going to take him." Then you don't have to worry about him. But once again, we say it a million times. Your players don't need to be on the best teams, and we all know the Raiders. No. Sorry, Raider fans. Your team, record-wise, once again, will suck. But thank goodness for your fantasy players, because we always get a lot out of them. Jennings last year, McFadden when he's playing. It works out. It definitely works out.
Well, and when Palmer was the quarterback there,
right.
He was like beasting out. So they are funny for the fantasy, numbers in that realm. But and Oakland, you're dumb because you had the most money to spend in free agency, and you let go of a lot of your best players, and then you didn't sign many players. So what are you doing with your money? We aren't sure yet, but sorry, Oakland fans, you're going to suck.
Yeah.
Again.
Yes. Sorry. So let's bring it around the last round here. As I talked about in our Bears segment, of course, we lost Josh McCown down to Tampa Bay. And, of course, he signed a 2-year, $10 million deal. Last season, he had 1,829 yards, 13 touchdowns, a 109 passer rating. That's why he was able to get $5 million a year. Everybody was going, man, he got $5 million a year. He got 109 passer rating. I mean, that means you're consistent. He came in a clutch. He got our team, he put our team where it needed to be.
Yeah, then, we had a chance.
Yes.
The playoffs.
Yeah. So, we just stupidly put color back in. Anyway, you now have the new coach down there, Lovie Smith. And the reason you're not going to have the same output that you had from McCown is Lovie Smith. We're very familiar with him on the Bears. We're very familiar with low output fantasy quarterbacks. And that's exactly what he's going to end up doing, because Lovie's going to run that defense and he's going to grind games. And you're going to see, 20, 16 games. You're going to see, 9-6 games. You're going to see low-scoring games because he likes to grind that defense. And McCown, I mean, he has VJ down there, Vincent Jackson, of course, and he has Williams, but, he doesn't have Alshon Jeffrey. He doesn't have Brandon Marshall anymore, which that's a completely different chemistry. So hopefully he can build that chemistry down there and get you some halfway decent fantasy. But this draft coming up, the college draft out of college, the NFL draft, is going to yield a lot of young talent. And who knows what we're going to get out of that fantasy-wise. So that's also going to put McCown's stock down even further, because where's Johnny Football going to end up? Is he going to come out balling? You have a lot of potential. So I just think, I think he is high risk if you take him high in the draft. I would take him mid or lower, because there's going to be a lot better quarterbacks out there to take.
Yeah, and that's the thing, we talked about last year was quarterbacks are a dime a dozen fantasy-wise. There's so many quarterbacks that are all pretty much in the same range once you get out of the Tom Brady, Peyton Manning, Aaron Rodgers, Drew Brees, those four. Once you're out of those four, a bunch of them are stacked real close together. I don't think McCown's going to do what he did. I think half of the reason, probably more than half the reason he did what he did was because of Trestman and the offense that Trestman ran, which won't be the same down there in Tampa Bay. So I wouldn't draft him. I would probably pick him up for a bye week if he has a great matchup. But that's just me. Unless you're in a super deep league and you absolutely just need a quarterback. But I don't think his numbers are going to be there. So
he's not going to be the person that you picked up off the waiver wire last season and rode to glory. Like a lot of teams did. A lot of people picked him up and thought, I'll risk him, and then all of a sudden he started putting up these huge numbers, and then people are like, where is he on the waiver wire? Oh, Joe Blow's, mechanics got him. Shit. That's the way it goes in fantasy, as we know. We're making these predictions now, and it's going to switch, once the NFL draft happens.
Shall be interesting. So let's just stick with Tampa Bay, because that's my last one. I'm talking about Tampa Bay's defense. Now, we just said they have a new head coach, Lovie Smith. We know him very well. and he is defensive-minded, as we all know. The Bears were turnover machines when he was with us. We do miss those days as Bears fans. We don't miss having a crappy offense, so sorry about that, Lovie Smith.
Mm-hmm.
And their defensive coordinator is Leslie Frazier.
Yeah.
So I think that they are going to team up, and their defense is going to be good. Now, they ranked 16th in total D last season. I believe Tampa Bay will be in the top 10 defenses. I believe they have the potential to be in the top 5 this year. So, yes, I did say that now, and it's only March, but I do think they could be up there in the top 5 defenses. They signed cornerback Alteron Werner, and they signed also the best free agent defensive end, Michael Johnson. They signed defensive tackle Clinton McDonald, and they still have safety Deshaun Goldson. So they are stacked talent-wise, and if these guys can gel, they're going to be awesome. They are in a tough division offensive-wise. They have the Saints they play against, the Falcons, who should come back. What happened to you guys last year? And the Panthers, although I know Cam is over there crying his eyes out because the Panthers have nobody for him to throw to still.
Not anymore, nope.
No weapons. They went from having
Bye-bye, Steve
one
Smith.
and then, 2 with Greg Olsen, tight end, to, well, we only have Greg Olsen and we don't have any receivers. So Carolina's offense might not be that hard to play against. But Tampa Bay's offense, as we kind of just talked about, has a bunch of question marks. McCown is the quarterback. Doug Martin's coming back. Hopefully he will be good, but he's coming back from that big injury, so we don't really know what's going to go on with him yet. And they have a new tight end in Brandon Myers. So their offense is very up in the air. Will they be able to stay on the field? Will they be able to score points? I think that it's really going to be in the hands of Tampa Bay's defense to probably score some touchdowns to try to win games.
Yes.
And they're going to be on the field a lot. So they're going to have to be getting those turnovers and making a difference, and also holding their opponent down in the score column. So I think that fantasy-wise, you never take defenses, in the first few rounds, of course. That's just silly. But they are a defense to grab because I think they can be what basically Kansas City's defense was fantasy-wise last year, which I rode very, very far into the playoffs.
Yeah, Tampa Bay, they went reasonably in the middle last season, and they paid off for a lot of people because that defense kept Tampa Bay in games, especially with their really messed up quarterback situation.
Yeah, and that
last
being
year.
said, and they were 16th.
Yeah.
So if they can
they had a
bump it up,
horrible quarterback situation, as we all know, last season. So, hey, speaking of free agents, anyway. Yeah, I mean, it's gonna work out a lot better down there now that they have a coach that is a solid coach, a coach with a lot of experience, a coach that everybody doesn't hate, and he runs defenses, man. He took our Bears to a Super Bowl with the defense. He took the Mike Ditka plan of, okay, our offense is going to be okay, but we're going to ride it in. I mean, he managed to take a team to the Super Bowl with Rex Grossman at the helm.
Enough said there,
Yeah.
And that's why I said, fantasy-wise, you want the turnovers and the defensive touchdowns. I mean,
he's going to teach that
those help so much, and I just think that they're going to be the defense to do it. I do think, because we didn't really talk about this, but I think the Broncos' defense is going to be much improved, even though we didn't really mention them. But
they took on some people, and they're going to be
did.
super, super, super dangerous as well. Yeah, great, man. Well, maybe, as long as Peyton Manning figures out how to play, in a Super Bowl again,
But I'll say this now: I don't predict them to get back to the Super Bowl.
Really?
Even with their improvements. So,
wow, we're making
again, it's
bold
only March,
predictions.
but I'm saying it. I don't
I
predict them to get back into the Super Bowl.
And poor Alexis just cried a little bit. Our Denver super fan. She won't be buying you a shot anytime soon. Anyway, that's the end of our show. Thank you for watching our free agency show and for listening to our free agency podcast. Don't forget to go to our social media pages. Don't forget to go to bigballsfantasyfootball.com. Go to our Facebook page, facebook.com/bigballsfantasyfootball.
And, of course, tweet us. We love Twitter. It is @BigBallsFBall. So those are our social media.
Yes.
Our hub has everything,
Yes.
which we mentioned.
Go to the links.
We love the hub.
We're on Pinterest. We're on everything. You know, if there's something new, I'll stick us on there too. So thank you for watching. And there is, of course, going to be a lot more free agency action. And our next show will probably come right after the combine and right after the draft. And we will talk about the rookies that will be on teams and which ones you should draft in your fantasy drafts and which ones you shouldn't. Also, we are going to bring back the podcast and we are going to finish the wonderful, beautiful Bears Super Bowl season. So we'll have those up. They're going to be a little shorter this time, so you're not sitting for 3 hours, even though some of you might have enjoyed that. But we got a lot of listenership out of them, and I think we're going to have a lot of fun doing it.
Yeah, flashback football, some off-season stuff for everyone. But the draft is in May. Excited about that.
Yes.
And so we're signing off.
You need something to do on Sundays, right?
I know. It's year-round, though. Keeping up with it.
Year-round. Okay, thank you for listening. Good night.
Good night.